Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Passionately Wrong podcast. I'm James Bellerjo, and I'm here together with my co-host and friend, Randall Searles. And today we're going to continue our series of This versus That, trying to draw a contrast between two topics and helping give you several sides of the picture to help you make up your own mind about how you feel about it. In this case, we're going to talk about an issue that's important to a great many people, both the people who are directly affected by it and the people who are indirectly affected by it. And that is, should go to college or not? And if you do go to college, perhaps we'll have time to get into what sort of college and why. So I think from its foundation, well, anyway, to explain what I mean, Randy, about the people who are directed, of course, there's the child or the young adult who's deciding, or actually, I guess it could be anyone at any age. Do I want to go and get a college degree or not? And then there is the person or persons who are going to be paying for it, either the student themselves directly or members of their family. So that's what I meant when I said directly affected and indirectly affected. And those seem to be the two issues. You as the individual, what's it going to mean in terms of commitment and time that you devote your own life to? And then for also only you, but then anyone else who has to pay for it, that's a big deal. College is a big deal. And one of the reasons why people will be asking themselves this question, should I go to college or not?
Yeah,
Any other introductory remarks we need to make to set this one up?
yeah. So I think we're ideally suited for that. You went to college forever and a day after you got out of high school, straight through before you went and did your profession. And I wonder what further education you did after that. What we can into that later. And then I just did a year and joined the School of Hard Knocks, also known as the Army. And it's interesting because we can talk about this later too. Didn't start really concentrating on getting a degree until almost 12 years after I first started. And it was a lot different experience than that first year. And I think that's also something that kids and parents need to have a discussion about because my experience in college it was like high school. Hey, you have to be here. You have to do this. Like you have classes that you don't really want to take because they're mandatory because you're in a liberal arts college or something, and you're like, why am I taking Texas history? Especially since I lived in Europe my whole life and I don't really care about Texas history, but it's really important apparently. So there's just different things like that, and that later on in my life when I could really focus on what I wanted to do and I was really interested in the classes and I actually had some life skills, some life knowledge, some life experience where I could actually talk and debate with the teacher who was the subject matter expert. But in some ways, in some of the classes, I was a subject matter expert. We talked about things like Operation Just Cause and the invasion of Panama. And I was like, oh, I was there. Let me tell you how it went down. We were talking one day about the border fight between Peru and Ecuador. I was like, oh yeah, I was on the border and people are shooting at me. Let me talk about that. So it's almost like having a guest speaker in some cases and and me being able to give back to the class as well. Like instead of us just reading a book and the teacher telling about his book knowledge, because he probably didn't go to either one of those places. And it's like a hiccup for the day. It's a little bit different experience.
So that observation, Randy, I have also seen in terms of how it feels being in school with other people who have gone on to university, let's say right out of high school. So they're maybe 18, 19 years old. It's just the thing that they're doing, continuing their education versus people who come to it at a later point in their lives, like now at the University of Zurich, people who have already gotten their law degree and are working and come back for a master's degree, for example. And that might be relatively soon after they started working, but for some of them, it's near the end of their careers. And they have, I think, the continuing education students who are doing in adulthood have motive, most of them, than the ones who continue their education directly out of school. And that gets to maybe the first way we can come at this question, go to college or not go to college. The answer is very likely going to be contextual and situation specific. So how old are you? What do you want to achieve? What country are you in? And the first question I think people who are listening should ask themselves is, what's my objective? Why do I think it might or might not be a good idea to go to college? Traditionally, from the US perspective, which is where you and I were exposed to the higher education system, initially at least, we ironically went to high school outside the US, but the idea was very clear, I think, for almost all of our ASH colleagues, if we were going to go to university, it would be back in the US. let's just stick with that for 1 second. Do you know of anybody who didn't go to university in the US, or was it, yep, if you're going to go, you're going to go to the US? There must have been people who stayed in Europe, huh?
So you finished your high school in Ash, and I finished mine in ASL. So the people I graduated with in ASL, there was international students there. There was even Brits there. That the whole reason they went to that school was to go to school in the United States.
Okay.
So from my perspective, just because of the eliteness of our schools, a lot of the people, the only reason they were there if they were international students was to go back to the US. So I don't know anybody who did not. However, I will say that I know a number of military people that got out, and because their GI Bill covered the tuition for foreign schools, which are significantly less anyway, they went to cooking school in Italy, or they went into a business school in Paris or something like that. And so I know a number of people that did end up going to foreign schools after the military, but not after high school.
The US perspective, at the time we went to school in the 80s, and I think this persisted in the 90s and onwards, the main value proposition, the idea behind why one would seek a university, a college degree, is to enhance your job prospects. It's an additional qualification that is going to position you better for the hype for well-paid employment. And that bias is very strong in the US, I think, more than other countries. I've seen how it works in Germany and in Switzerland, where university is one path, but it is not the path that the majority of students take. And in fact, the majority go other ways, trade route or the apprenticeship route. And those are viewed as good and acceptable alternatives that more carefully pay attention to what's this person interested in? What are they good at? Not everyone is good at the types of stuff that you need to do to succeed in a traditional liberal arts environment. We'll come back to that as one of the reasons why you might incline one way or another. But I think starting with the thought process of what doing this for, I think still today, a lot of people consider a college degree to enhance their prospects of earning a good living. And I've seen research looking at different degrees. We'll probably have to come back to that, Randy, because what degree you choose is going to influence how well it serves the purpose. If your purpose is, I want to have a good career and earn decent money, then the type of field that you study is actually going to have let's just say that right up front. If you have that as your goal, then you need to be tactical, not just about the decision, do I go to college or not, but which college do I go to and what do I study when I'm there? So anyway, the studies that I've seen still, even with the dramatically higher increase in costs in college degrees over the last 30 years compared to inflation. So college has been rising at more than double the rate of inflation for 30 years now, which has made it quite expensive. Even with that, college tends to have now no longer a 7-figure bump in your lifetime earnings, but at least it's still a mid 6-figure bump, so $400,000 or $500,000 more over the course of your career if you have a college degree and you are working in a field that uses your college degree. And here's where I think the US has gone off the rails, but maybe I don't want to get ahead of myself. So that's my starting hypothesis. You go to college as a young person because you've been told, hey, this is the path to a good career. This is how you're going to increase your chances of earning a good living. Was that what you understood when you were facing the decision to go to college, or were there other factors for you too? Just, I don't know what else to do. That's what everyone does. We were in an unusual setting from Ash. Like you say, it was a more elite school, and the American School of London, I'm sure, was similar, where most of our colleagues probably did go on to college. But what were the thought processes?
I didn't want to go to college. My dad put that idea in my head that if I didn't go to college, because we were upper middle class, I would describe us for the school we went to in The Hague and in the ASL. And we went on vacation because we lived in Europe. We just drove across the border and went to Germany, and we went to Belgium, and we went all over Europe. And my parents I wouldn't call my parents rich, but they did pretty well. And my dad was good at saving, and we had a lot of nice vacations, pretty reasonable, nice houses and nice places in the countries we were at. And so he said, if you want to live a life like this, you need to go to college. And actually, that was the first time in my life, and I did it a lot of times in the military, where I was like, well, I don't think that's true, and I'll show you. But I did go to college, but mostly because my dad made it really easy. He said, try it for a year, you don't like it, you can always go out. But hey, I've already made a payment plan. I've already figured out how to pay for your college for you. I'm going to pay for the 100% of the first year, 80% of the second year. You can get a part-time job and pay the rest, and then do 60 and then 40 or whatever. And he had this plan, he had savings for it, and he was a great dad in that respect for sure. He's a great dad altogether, in my opinion. But he put that in my head. That was the only way I could succeed. And I think he truly believed that from where he came up and where he grew up. And all his brothers have degrees. His dad was an architect, so they came from a college family. I would say my mom's side of the family less so. And I don't want to go back to learning. I would like to do something else. And I did college for a year and I did very poorly, which surprised everyone because I was a really good high school student, thanks to your influence, mostly helping with Dr. DeWitt's class. So I quit after I quit. I flunked out, but I somewhere along the line I quit studying too. And I went into the army and I never thought I'd go back to college. In the back of my mind, because my dad said that, I really started looking for things in the army that would help me take college classes for not very much money. But it was never a priority for me until much later. I got my first bachelor's degree in 2000, and I went to college the first time in 86.
You were one of those motivated adult students then who came back to it with life experience and with your own motivation, not the idea that it was somehow necessary to earn a living. By that time, you had proven to yourself, no doubt, that, hey, I know how to make a living. I'm surviving quite well in the Army, thank you. And that wasn't the concern for you. I think the message that we still send, in my view, to people in high school is a misleading one and a harmful one. We tell them, if you wish to succeed in life, you need to have a college degree in the US. Not the case in every other country, obviously. But there is still quite a bit of that old belief that, yes, to get ahead, you need a college degree. And why do I say it's misleading? It's misleading because of the fact that there are alternative paths on the one hand. There are other ways to absolutely be successful in life. And I'm not talking about just a college dropout who starts as an IT startup. I'm talking about someone who did like what you did, someone who works in various trades and professions that by no means require a degree and intellectual learning, but rather require a person to know how to do something technical or skilled or work with their hands. That's one reason why. And the other reason why not is a person's success in university and their success in using their college degree depends upon whether they're suited for it. And what I mean by that is, if you were a good student in high school who then good student in college, and that's less common. It means there was probably a motivation issue rather than an ability issue, because you did fine later when you went, right? There are plenty of people who are not good students in high school, and guess what? They're not going to be a good student in university, potentially, because not everyone likes and works well in that environment. Not everyone likes to be a student. There's a lot of reading involved. There's a lot of writing involved. And so I would recommend people who are evaluating this start by being honest with yourself. You don't have to say it necessarily to anybody else, but you should really consider whether you like studying. It's kind of important because you're going to spend a lot of years and a lot of hours doing it. And why does it matter, right? Even if you don't like it, should you just suck it up and do it? Well, my suggestion is no, not if the opportunity cost of pursuing a path that is not highly likely to be rewarded in the end is so high. The opportunity cost is high because you have to pay for it and it's expensive as hell if you don't get a scholarship or you go to an expensive school. Talk about that. And then you're losing those years of time when you could be learning another trade, you could be already working, you could be in the military, whatever. And if you go and you're not necessarily good at it compared to your colleagues, then how useful is it to graduate 80th percentile at the bottom of your class? I guess our current president demonstrates that you can be an absolutely middling student and even graduate near the bottom of your class, still go on to be president of the United States. Okay, but that's rare, not what you should expect, right? If you're not a good student and you don't have prospects of doing good in university, I'd consider not going.
So I think the other thing being emphasized is you have to go to a really great school to get a good degree, to get a job, and you have to pay a lot of money because all I hear about is how expensive it is, but community colleges aren't expensive. And most universities will accept a 2-year, if you have good grades from community college, you can transfer over, and especially to state universities, but even private universities will accept you especially if you got good grades and you have goals and you pass the interviews and things like that. So there is a way where that is cheaper that you can go that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. You can go to in state universities, in state tuition is a lot cheaper than out of state tuition as well. So there's a, I don't know if it's a myth. People who go to really good colleges usually get really good jobs. I think that's a to compare the two. That's probably true. I don't know. I don't know on that, but there's plenty of people. There's plenty of lawyers. There's plenty of doctors that went to state universities and do very good. They make pretty good money, and they're very happy in their jobs, and they're very happy with their loans. They're not as much as everyone else.
That's a good argument and a good point to raise now for being tactical in your approach to getting a college degree. If you accept the basic hypothesis that having a college degree opens up opportunities for you, which I think it does, still does, absolutely, then it is not necessary to go to an Ivy League school and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. It is not. You're right, Randy. I know, and this is not unusual or unlikely, plenty of people who go to Ivy League is just a tiny little sliver of all of the colleges in the US. And when all those people who go to the other 95% of the schools, a great deal of them do just fine, absolutely fine. Yes, you're right. And if you can do that in a way that allows you to experiment more cost effectively, to start with, you're going to continue living at home and try out going to a local community or your in-state college and have much lower costs as a result. Great way to start out the experiment and see if you're suited to the college life and if it's something that still grabs you after that period. And you might decide to stay at the place that you started. You might transfer after some period of time, but you'll have started off in a way that doesn't put you behind the eight ball, make it expensive or difficult for you. That's one of the things that I think this sort of very consistent message, you have to go to college to succeed, doesn't do high schoolers a service, is we used to have pretty consistently a third of our students go on and get a college degree, 30, 33%. Then the message in the 80s and onward became very clear. Oh, you have to go to college if you want to have a chance of a good middle class or for middle class life. And so more and more high started going to college. But I don't think more and more people were somehow had an affinity for it or were suited for it. So you now see 70% of high school graduates going to college, of people still end up with a college degree, which means, Randy, after 6 years of school, you've got almost half of the people who go to college end up never finishing and still incurring a significant amount of debt, incurring the cost of the lost time spent pursuing the education they never got. I think that's where your idea of experimenting with a lower cost approach and maybe something that eases you into it would be a really nice way to approach it. You don't want to be successful in the long run.
I also think that you were talking about strategy of paying, but part of that is, do you need to spend 4 years to get a 4-year degree? You can take almost a semester every summer and cut that down to 3. You can take, instead of just taking 12 hours a semester, you can take 15. You can take classes in high school now. It seems to be easier and easier. I guess not every high school offers that, but there seems to be opportunities where you could go simultaneously to community college while you're going to high school and get a couple of the basics knocked out before. So your 4-year becomes 3-year, becomes 2.5 years. So you're not, you get into the workspace a little bit faster.
Yes. I think I'm having two thoughts as I listen to you describe that. On the one hand, absolutely think it's a good idea to go quickly, to be really focused on it when you are studying and get it completed and behind you as quickly as possible. Yes. Partly just because of the opportunity cost. Would you rather be 3 years in your education or 6 years in your education? I know there can be two views about that, right? To enjoy life while it's happening, don't work so hard. I personally lean towards work hard, get it done, move on to the next thing. And that's how I did it. You're right. I went to school for quite a few years, but relatively speaking, I managed to shave 2.5 years off of the total time to get my 3 degrees. I got my bachelor's degree half a year early, and I got a combined law degree and business degree in 3 years instead of 5 years by doing nothing else for 3 years. Yeah, it was a lot of work. It was painful. I didn't have any life outside of studying in school, but then it was done. And I was 25 and had my credentials, and I started working at a higher level than I otherwise would have. I saw along the way people who either burned out, they didn't like that schedule, or decided they didn't like college. And some of them took 3, 4 years to figure that out, right? You're in your senior year and you're like, I don't really like it, and you just finish a couple of credits short of your degree. That I find there's always a reason for it, but good to have a purpose and a goal when you start this, and then to pursue your goal with significant dedication and purpose. I think you and I would probably both agree to that. Whatever it is you choose to do it with commitment, and then your chances of success are enhanced. We haven't gone into, so far, we've just been highlighting maybe some pros and cons, Randy, and maybe some suggestions on how to do this more cheaply and more efficiently if you wish to do it. Do we have any thoughts about whether, I don't know if we're in the business of saying should or should not, but I guess we do have to draw a contrast between the two things. What if you were advising your kids today and I'm advising my kids today? I guess we can start with that. What would we tell them?
Well, it's pretty easy. Your kids are in college and my kids are in college. So I've apparently advised them. So my advice was, and one took it well and one did well is it's my opinion. I didn't take my advice fully, or they did, but they went their own ways. But my advice was just what we talked about. Like, there's no reason to beat around the bush. What are you going to do over the summer? Like, and the answer was, nothing. I'm like, well, then just why don't you knock another semester out and then you can get out of college and get on with your life? Because I don't have any treasured memories from my college. I only went a year, but I didn't, but it's something there that would have wasted a year to get finished faster. When I was in the Army, when I decided, once again, it's a little brainwashing trick my dad did, like, hey, you can't succeed unless you need a college education. So if you decide to get out of the Army, you need to go get a college education. And so I got it while I was in the Army, but I became laser focused. Like, I went to the college and I'm like, here's all the stuff I got from high school and the college, 1 year of college I had. What's the fastest way I can get a college degree? And they're like, oh, well, you can get a US history degree if you take these 8 classes. I'm like, done. Let's do it. Load them up. And then that's all I did. I took them and one after the other until I finished and I got my degree. Did I want to use that history degree another way? The way I looked at it was, I saw a lot of people, a lot of peers of mine not working in the industry they got a degree in. So somewhere along the time in the military, I was like, I just need a degree. I just need to be a step ahead of someone else who's applying for the job. And if that person doesn't have military leadership experience, isn't a person like I am at 28 or whatever, and I have a degree and he has a degree, I think I'll outshine him. That was my I didn't know I was going to stay in the Army. But and then I got my second degree and was something I really wanted to do. But before I did that, I took an MBA, quit because I didn't want to do it because I didn't like it. And I said, what am I going to do with this? And then I took an international relations master's degree, quit halfway through that, going, nah, what am I going to do with this? And then I said, you know what I really want to do? I want to write. And then I took the creative writing one, which I really enjoyed. But I think the advice, we go back to your advice question, is figure out what you want to do. And if you haven't figured it out, maybe you don't go to college right now. Travel, live in a hammock on a beach, go work somewhere, get some work experience, whatever you want to do, and to figure out what you want to do. But I don't see, like, my personal experience was I was aimless at college. Like, I was engineer degree, but like I really didn't like any of my subjects in the engineer. And that's what I ended up doing because I had to choose something. And I didn't have any focus. I didn't know what I wanted to do for the rest of my life at the age of 18 when I went to college. And I wasn't ready for college. And really, the military was the perfect answer for me because it helped me figure it out. And then once you figure it out, don't beat around the bush. Just get your whatever qualifications degree that you need and then move on with the rest of your life. Because college is just it's a quick, short stage that really delays you moving on with the rest of your life, finding your soulmate and finding your perfect job and getting on with like I said, getting on with your life.
I would say there's a couple of things in there I'd like to unpack, Randy. One is I can imagine some parents listening to this cringing when they hear you say that a person should go travel, live in a hammock on the beach. I don't think you're wrong, though. It's the rigid sort of idea that there's only one way or a specific way that our lives need to go creates some of the people feeling and pressure that they need to go to when they might not. So your idea of thinking about what you want and then not feeling pressured into going, not feeling rushed into going is correct. I also like the advice to, once you've made up your mind, get on with it. The qualifier, and there's one other I heard in what you that I liked, and I'd like to call out. I think it is absolutely okay to have started something and realize, whoops, I don't like this. It doesn't suit me, and I'm going to stop it. Better stop than it is to continue and get a degree in a field that you don't like. What does that do? So you have the strength to do that. You could say, I was an idiot for picking stuff. I should have thought about that before I went, but I don't do it that way. It's hard to tell sometimes, right? Until you're in something.
It's
I feel like you should have known
well,
better.
there's a difference between the way I went through it with my money and what if you're not
Ah,
parent, your parents are paying for it and you're like, nah, I don't like that. Nah, I don't like that. And then you get the
right.
tomboy thing. Like lots of people take 6 years to get a degree and
Yeah, they're called doctors. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to say though is it's I don't think it's always helpful when we give advice or people read advice that says, "Oh, find your passion, find what you really like to do and make sure you do that." Because I don't think it's possible for a person to tell always because they don't have enough experience in the world. How does a 17 or 18 or even a 20-year-old know what their lifelong passion is going to be? Yes, perhaps some people, since the age that of 3, they knew that they wanted to be an environmentalist. If you don't have a clear thing that's calling out to you, don't worry, in my opinion. Don't worry a bit because having too clear an idea of the way you think your life is going to go, quite, if I knew at 17 that I was going to do this and then I put all efforts into pursuing that, well, maybe I would have been successful, but I also would have missed 99 other things that were presented to me. An opportunity came up because I was at this place at this time and I met this person. I would do that. Being open to opportunity and being open to serendipitous encounter is just as important and maybe even more important than sitting there and meditating on what your purpose in life. I don't know what the hell my purpose in life is, but I do know that I will approach each situation with an open mind and with the intention to do my very best if I set my mind to doing it. That's a different approach to saying, I'm not going to be aimless. I'm going to pay careful attention to what's going on around me, but I also am not going to worry if I know what I'm going to be doing in 10 years because I've identified some grant. Do you know what I'm getting at, Randy?
yeah. I also think going back to the money question, if your parents are footing the bill and then you're just changing mass majors every year, it's going to be a discussion, I think. But the other thing is you have to look at if you do find your passion or something you think you enjoy, you probably need to weigh your the cost of your education is versus what you're going to make on the other side. Like if you're paying $80,000 a year for a social worker to be a social worker, maybe you need to go to a state university and not Harvard to do that because unless you
Yes.
have a back, I think there's just some realistic expectations. Like a lot of kids don't know enough about money to understand what they're signing when they get a student loan or or they didn't really look at. I had no idea what an engineer made when I was trying to get my engineer degree. I had no idea what to do with my history degree. I wanted a degree. And my master's in creative writing got last, like, I pretty much knew authors weren't going to make a lot of money, but I was going to retire in the military and I'd have a little bit of something to fall back on if it didn't work.
So I'm going to come back to that because my 3-part advice for people trying to evaluate this is going to end with the practical considerations. And I'm going to ask people to do something that you and I did not do. And I'm not sure is even possible for people to do. So let's see how it sounds. If you're trying to figure out whether you're suited, there you go. It's a tough standard. You're trying to figure out whether or not you should be heading to college or doing something else. The 3 steps I would encourage you to consider are: 1, are you a good enough student? And objectively, what I think that means is if you are not in the top half of your class, if you haven't been able to perform consistently, whatever that means to you, at the 50% and up level, you probably should think really hard about doing because it is more of the same. It is more intense of the same, which people are all themselves going to be relatively good students compared to good people who don't go to college. So step 1, are you a good enough student? Step 2, do you like studying? Because you might be a good student if you flog yourself, but hate every minute of it. And you better like it because it's a big piece of your young life if you're going to go. So can you focus? Do you like reading? Do you like writing? Do you like being in classrooms? Be honest about that. You can cultivate it, you can learn it, but if you don't already like it, that's something you're going to have to overcome. And step 3 is what we were getting into a moment ago, Randy, which is be tactical. Are you able and capable of being tactical? And I mean by that, both your choice of study, a general liberal arts degree or an art history degree or something that doesn't have obvious economic prospects at the end of it is maybe not the best use of your time, even though it might be the thing you're really genuinely interested in. For most people, you really have to think about the cost benefit. And that's what you and I and probably a lot of students have a hard time doing. They're 18, 19, 20. You don't know what jobs pay. It's now you can always find it out. You can look stuff up. You can get more information. I'd like to think that information was available in our time. We just didn't do it. Went to college. I went to my university and I studied psychology because they were good at it. I didn't know anything about what psychologists earned or how they earned it and how long I would have had to have studied to get a degree. It wasn't until my senior year, literally my senior year, Randy, where I said, oh, shit, this is a terrible path. Yeah, I just don't earn any money, or I'd have to study for 6 more years to go and get my PhD. What can I do that gets me earning money more quickly? So then I was ruthlessly pragmatic and I said, okay, law school and business school. And I'm going to do this to make sure that I had a chance of earning a decent living. That was very pragmatic then, but I wish I had been more pragmatic 3.5 years earlier when those questions first came up. So if you're a good student, if you like studying, and if you're able to do some research about what sorts of careers might both suit you and represent a good cost benefit analysis, then I would say you're a good candidate for potentially considering a college degree. Let's talk about the alternative, Randy. If you say no to some or all of those criteria, well, first you can tell me about the criteria. Would you add, detract, any comments on it? But then secondly, what if I say no to that stuff? What are you telling me? Let's say we are in the 60% of people who probably are just as good not go to college. What should they do? It's easy for us to say, don't go to college if you don't like it, but does that doom a pursue a less of an, what does it mean if you say don't go to college? What are we actually advising people?
I think it's really interesting. I had a discussion with my wife, who's Hungarian European, and she's like a very small sliver of people in Europe go to college because they go off and do trades, which are
Yes.
paid well. You get great benefits because of more probably because of the social medicine and whatever else is going on too. But you can go do a trade and that's perfectly acceptable. And I would also remind people who don't know much about European universities that there are 25% of people going to college because they test in and there's only so many slots in college and it's not everyone who wants to can go to community college or state university and get in and everything else. So I think that's not talk we hear a lot in the United States about, hey, you can be an air conditioning and heater repairman, which pays freaking dang good. I got friends that do that and they are some of the richest people I know. They're plumbers that are making good money. There's all kinds of people. You can start your own business. I had a friend in the military that started his own framing shop and then he made it to a chain and did it. I had like 3 or 4 open up around the United States. So whatever your passion is, and we talk about passion. I talked about passion anyway. Whatever, try to figure out and experiment with what you may want to do. Eventually, most likely, you're going to have to decide on the way you're going to make your living to pay your way through life. But you don't have to jump at it. I guess I say this from a person who always had a backstop. I had a very supportive family. I spent most of my life in the military, which was a good backstop because they fed me and housed me for the first 8 years of my life. So, and I had a guaranteed salary for the whole time I was in the military. And there's people out there that don't have that backstop. So they have to make more decisions more quickly and definitively in order to survive. So, but I'd say working what you need to do to survive while you're trying to figure out what gonna make you happy is not a bad thing either.
I would say whether or not a person has a backstop, that it is sensible to be efficient and quick and make good decisions, right? Just, I hear what you're saying. If you have a backstop, you have a little bit more flexibility. You can afford to make a mistake or take a little bit longer. But for me, the benefit of thinking through this stuff in advance, I like the word you also just used, which is experiment. If you can find ways to experiment within a short time frame and with a relatively low cost, then that really can go a long way towards giving you confidence that, oh, I wouldn't really like that, or I would like. When my son didn't go to college here in Switzerland. He didn't pass the entrance exam. He went down the apprenticeship route. And when you are evaluating what apprenticeship to take, you can do what are called schnuppers here, but which is I think that word translates to sniff around. You go in for a day or 2 days and you sniff around. It's organized by the companies. and they show you, oh, hey, this is what you do in the mechanics shop, and this is what you do over here in the CAD line. And they try to give the kids, they're young that age, they're only maybe 14, 15, and they show you, this is what we do here today. And most of the time, the kids would come back and say, well, I don't want to do that. I didn't realize that's what that job meant. But it's super helping. Within a day or an afternoon, you get a sense of, it's not obviously perfect, but it's better than just guessing, oh, do I want to be a pilot, or do I want to be a train driver? Do I want to be, there are ways. And if you don't have the benefit of being in a country where that system of apprenticeships is really well developed, then you can still reach out to people who are in those fields. If you think, hey, I really always wanted to be a baseball umpire, well, there might be a way for you to figure out how that person became one and what the career path is like. Maybe that's not a good example, but in my experience, the people who are in fields are, and people in general, are willing to help you out. They're willing to talk to you much more than we might fear before we make the approach. People are actually pretty cool when it comes to helping out people. Someone comes and says, hey, I'm really interested in your profession. Can you tell me something about it? Would you mind? Of course, you might get some no's, but you'll probably also get some yeses. And that gives you awesome insight in a low cost way to, is this something that might be interesting to you? After you've done that experimentation, then you can jump in with both feet. Say, aha, now I still might change my mind later, but I have a hypothesis. I've tested that hypothesis a little bit. Now I'm going to go to the Culinary Institute of America to learn how to be a chef because I think I really want to start my own restaurant one day, or whatever the thing is for you. So the experimentation I like, and what we're advising people is there are paths. What I think I'm saying is, and I personally believe, there absolutely are paths that do not involve getting a college degree. And by the way, Randy's example is a good one. You don't have to get a college degree now. If you decide later it's something that would be helpful to you, depending upon what you're doing, you can do it later. And you might even enjoy it more than as a bit of an older adult with some experience under your belt. I remember when I was in law school, and almost all of the students were continuing on directly from college, there was an older guy who had already gone to medical school and completed his medical degree and had been working as a doctor. For some reason, God only knows, he decided he also wanted to go to law school. He was very different than the rest of us because he had life experience. He had quite a bit of he was a better student. He was a really good student, bastard. So you could be more competitive if you wait a little before going to college. Absolutely worth keeping in mind. So there's not a sort of one size fits all approach. It's not necessary to do it in a certain way. And if we're giving people advice, probably it's to have this, however you arrange it, give yourself time to interrogate yourself, ask yourself these questions about what it is you're suited for. What do you like? What do you don't like? How can you test your theories about what you like and what you don't like? And then feel free testing things out. See, all right.
There's something to be said too about you don't have to have a high-failing job. It's something to be said about you just being really good at a job that it's not your favorite, but it puts food on the table. It pays for your kids to go to school. It pays for your car, pays for the house that your family lives in, and you progressively get better at it. And so you become an expert in it, and that's your life. And it's not the dream job you ever wanted, but you have a good life balance with your work and your home life. And that's all you need. And some people are fine with that. And there shouldn't be any shame in that, or someone shouldn't say, that's all you do? You're a plumber? He's like, yeah, I work 9 to 5. Good to go.
One of the benefits of my psychology studies, Randy, is I learned that there are different things that motivate people. And there's such a sense that either prestige or power or money are the things that make a job rewarding. That is not way far the only or the most important thing. Everyone thinks money is going to be the motivator. What you just described, either the work-life balance, but also the sense of mastery. I have become really good at this. So just the other day, my son came back from a busy day at the garage. He's studying a particular kind of auto mechanics right now. He works and goes to school, and he works in a garage. And he came back and said, I did a 5-hour replacement of some drivetrain thing or something. And he was so happy to have managed that complex, difficult task that other apprentices couldn't do, and even some mechanics couldn't do. And that sense of accomplishment, of being good at your job and of getting better at your job, is a great feeling, knowing that you're good at something. And if you put your time and attention are getting better at it, that's an awesome feeling and worth a significant amount of money for doing a job that you may or may not feel a strong connection to.
And then sometimes when you become an expert at something, a lot of those skills transfer over to other things, and either a different career or at least, you know, doing fixing stuff around the house or helping other people out or whatever. My military stuff, I thought it was gonna be pretty useless and I'm pretty much useless around the house. I can't fix anything, but I can tie a knot. I can tie about 50 different knots for 50 different purposes. And so when my wife's like, man, I wish I had a place to lay the blankets out to dry. I was like, hey, I can tie that sucker. I'll never come down. It's
I've
like,
also
wow.
seen that the skills and experiences you accumulate in life end up being useful to you in more ways than you could have anticipated at the time, which for me translates into being open to opportunity. Something interesting comes along and you think, oh, should I do that or not? I would say, yes, do it. And you'll have the experience and maybe you'll also have some benefits that come later, whether it's tying knots or calligraphy that Steve Jobs took before he dropped out of college that later turned into the Mac having really cool typography or whatever the issue is. Yeah. All right. So I'm not sure we have definitively answered the question, but that's okay because this was one for the individual to decide for themselves after the introspection. And I talk to friends, talk to colleagues, shoot Randy and I an email, or leave a comment on this episode. Like, here's what I'm thinking about. We'll share our experiences as well, but you don't have to make these decisions alone. They're big decisions. We get that. And we wish you good luck as you pursue the next chapters in your lives and career.
Thanks, guys.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please comment on the show with your thoughts. We read all of your comments.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.